that's before us, Chair? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, approved. Next.
Thank you. The second one is just a resolution to approve updates to the emergency action and response plans for both the Human Services Building and the Municipal Center. Most of these changes are housekeeping. It's been about 6 years since you saw these. There is one small change. If you really looked at the attachment, we were changing from reach to New York Alert for the means that we notify employees of an emergency. Based on Office of Emergency Services resolution last week, that's actually going to change now to regroup. So the county attorney will make that update between now and when you see it at the board. But other than that, really just small minor housekeeping changes. And we added an appendix talking about our distress alarms and that are now quite a few of them around in the buildings.
Well, let's get it on floor for discussion. Any move to approve the updates? Yes. Supervisor Driscoll, seconded by Supervisor Wild. Discussion. No discussion. I'll entertain a motion to approve the emergency action and response plans for the Human Services Building and the Municipal Center as presented to you today. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Approved. Amy?
The only other thing that I shared, we don't need to discuss it, just for your information. Just a flyer, and I don't know, did you get one of these, Supervisor? About the self-insurance department, what we do, who we are, where we are, some light bedtime reading. If you have any questions afterwards, please just reach out to me. But it hasn't been updated in a number of years, and I thought it'd be a good exercise for this committee to get to know us a little better. That's all I have.
Any questions for Amy about the self-insurance department, what they do and so forth? They have she has a very nice presented handout for us to review. Any at this time, questions or thoughts? Yes, Supervisor Conover.
A general comment, how supportive it is to have Amy, not only the information that they developed in the program, but also the outreach that they do out to the communities. It's very much appreciated.
It is. Amy does a great job.
Enough to try to generate safety in the workplace. And they have experts helping us. You can't stop every accident, but those that we can, I very much appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Conover. I think that is the consensus of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Board of Elections. Bill, Beth.
We settled on the case with we have a little extra, this is just information that we want to share with nothing. I think we've shared it once before, and we'll take it very normally happens.
Okay, so this is a discussion of funding the two positions that were created in 2023 budget. Bill or Beth, would you like to elaborate? I know we've been here before, and I know we've discussed this before, but now we're discussing funding.
Yes. We know last year's budget, the budget officer had put two positions in the budget for the Board of Elections, but did not fund them. Looking to see, because we had advised the committee that there was a bill in the Senate and the Assembly that was going to be cause for two more hirings within the Board of Elections. That bill is still in there and it's gained speed. It's what they call 50. Right now, it's 50% engrossed within the Senate and the Assembly, which means it's halfway home to telling us that it's gonna have to be done. Our problem is here. It's just it became too much for a 4-person office. in those sheets that I handed out to you, if you look at I think it was the very last sheet, you'll see the offices around the state of the County Board of Elections. And looking to the far right is extra full-time help that every other office has, every other Board of Elections throughout the state. You look at the number of voters and they've all got their full-time commissioners or full-time deputies, but then you look at the assistants and the extra help they have. We've been fortunate enough to have the ability to bring in extra help with a small budget, but it's just not sufficing and it's not going to suffice. As it stands right now, for the year of 2023, there's 105 current bills in legislation strictly for the Board of Elections, strictly out of the Elections Committee. 105 bills sitting there. Out of the 105 that are sitting there, 20 of them are 50% in gross, which means, as I said, they pass through one house or the other. The bill that we're currently talking about today was just discussed on the news today, that it's in the budget. It's in the state budget. We've got our fingers crossed that they don't cut that. We don't lose that money to give us these extra positions. But at this point, our theory in the Board of Election, which has, we're on a pedestal, believe it or not, in New York State. When people discuss boards of elections, they look at Warren County. We've been very lucky to have the financial backing that this county has given us, the ability that they've given Beth and I to put us on that pedestal. It's a pedestal we enjoy and we want to stay on. And I just, my feeling is this ounce of preventive maintenance down the road is going to stop that emergency expense that's going to come out of this county, because sooner or later, with the lack of workers everywhere, we're going to run into a problem. We're doing our best to stay out of it at this time. I don't know.
Just, our per diem do help us tremendously, but with all these changes that we're having, we need the trained staff, especially, heading into 2024. This would be the year to get them trained. We have a new voter reg system, so we're all kind of learning it together. And just the pieces that are coming in with same day or not same day registration 10 days prior to election, which is the same time that we're running early voting. And it's also the same time that we're tracking absentees daily. And that would be the first day that we're opening absentees to count them. We need people to get them trained so they know all these steps and election law going into these processes.
And we looked at our budget and throughout, and I know one of the questions is going to be, I know I had it when I was sitting here myself. What are you going to give up to get it? We've looked at our budget. We want our deputies now that do the work now to be trained to create the ballot. The ballot right now is created by a bipartisan part-time team. One has a full-time job and the other one's retired but comes in and helps us. We leave at 4 o'clock. They're still there working on the ballot after we leave. And when we come in the next morning, we have to check it for mistakes to see if there's any issues with it. And if there is, we have to call them back in. They're not there at the same time we're there to get these ballots built. We want our deputies that are there with us to be working on these and to be able to get it done and taken care of while all of us are right there. Those two voting machine support specialists, I pulled their salaries for last year. Between the two of them, there was a little over $4,400. Extra help position that we'd be able to give up is a little over 1,000. And the use of extra help last year was $7,300. That would drastically go down. We wouldn't need that extra help because we'd have those people there with us constantly. Back in 2021, there was a little bit of a mix-up and two positions were taken away from us to the tune of $10,000 that weren't supposed to be taken unless we got the bodies to replace them, but they were taken and we lost that money then. So that's it's $22,800. I mean, and we're not a revenue raising department. And our hope is that the help from the state stays in the budget. But we can't sit and wait and hope that happens.
Okay, so We have new and expanded voting opportunities, but and that's good for the voter, but it does mean more time, effort, so forth by the Board of Elections. You need help, and you're willing to mitigate it by reassigning some of the duties to others. And so I'm pleased to see that effort to try and mitigate your costs in an appropriate way. So we go to discussion or get it on the
Bring
floor?
that motion to the floor for discussion.
All right, motion to the floor brought by Supervisor Wild, second by Supervisor Garachi. All right, let's discuss. Anybody from the committee first? Seeing nobody from the committee, I'll go to the privilege of the floor and
You have saved money over there by, you don't order all the ballots like you used to, right? I mean, you have gone to efforts to save money without having to order a ballot for every registered voter, right? Correct? So I mean, you are save money. You left us the name off the thing, you save money there, but.
That would be when we did this.
No, I'm serious. Things to save some money, printing costs of paper.
Yes, and election day workers somewhat, again, a lot of things have changed for them as well. They have more responsibilities. With the on-demand printing and in the e-poll books, we can cut our election day work.
If you could have it walking in June rather than March.
Last year, the state expanded this, as Supervisor Strauss said, the Chairman Strauss said, they expanded our early voting. We had to get our nose to the ground and find a place, and luckily the city of Glens Falls worked with us. We're in City Hall, which isn't basically the best place to be. I mean, but it works. They've opened their door to us. We're using it. So now that's an additional early voting location that takes 9 days prior to regular voting, with an additional 72 hours that have to be put in. And we're in on that Sunday collecting those machines and bringing back to the office. Oh, and this sheet, and I'm sorry I neglected it, but if you look at that sheet, it basically, we tried to show you on a percentage basis on what these new employees would be doing and what the state has handed down to us and told us this is what we need to do. And this is just a portion of what, of what they'd be doing.
well, in addition to that, they'd be able to act as backup as the others, whether they be illness or vacation or personal time.
We really don't have downtime.
Yeah,
It's hard for any of us really to take any time off.
well, and Supervisor Leggett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if there could be a description of the workload through the year. We talk about crunch times, like which you are in right now and going through, but workload for 2 new employees throughout the year.
Well, yeah, and if you look at our annual report that we're required by the state to do, that's that booklet that we give you at the end of each year that describes what we've done from month to month to month to month. If you take, and if you don't have it, if you'd like us to send that to you, be more than glad to send it to you again, but it's, how many pages thick is it, Beth? It's gotta be,
I'm sure y'all did receive it.
it's all broke down month to month.
I mean, just in the automatic registration from agencies, every Tuesday we get a packet from DMV. Could be up to 200 registrations. So any addresses that changed in Warren County automatically get sent to us. So we have to research every one of those pieces of paper to see if, yes, indeed, that they changed their address. Make those changes in the registration system, notify the voter that got it, and here's your new voter registration card. If they are not, and they're an incomplete voter, which we have to reach out to that voter, saying that we received information from DMV, any other agencies, that we don't have enough information to vote, for you to register to vote. So we sent out a letter and another registration form in that packet. So those 200 pieces of paper get looked at and done something with every week.
Okay,
That's just one of the things that's changed at this point.
back to the
and-
committee, I think, I'm sorry, Commissioner McLaughlin, I thought you were done.
I think I am. at this
Okay.
point.
Supervisor Thomas.
So how much money are we talking here? I don't see anything.
We had that, it was, on the back of that form that we had to get approved. It would be, two positions, bipartisan positions, $47,608. It should be, is it right there, Frank? I think, I'm sorry, Supervisor Thomas. That was the one we had approved by
47.6.
47,600.
Oh, wait.
Yes, it is on page 3 of this.
3, yep.
Yeah, right there.
Oh, all I can say is that, you know, the more computerized we get, the more it costs us to run these operations. And all of a sudden, the more people we, you know, I guess I'm not really comprehending that thought. You know, the more electronic we get, the more people we need, the more money we got to spend on equipment. You know, so maybe if you got rid of some of the electronics, you wouldn't need as many people and it wouldn't cost as much.
Well, I think the biggest problem with that, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think the biggest problem with that is we're regulated by the state, not by the county. The state, and I agree, the unfunded mandate, I know where you're coming from on that. But when the state hands us something down and says, this is the route you're going to take, and this is the route you're going to go to run a board of elections, that's the route we have to go. We have no alternative. We can't say to them, no, we'd like to go back to the old lever machines, even though some of us might want to. We don't have that alternative and we don't have that opportunity. If the state law comes out, which is 883 pages long and tells us, this is what you got to do. This is what we have to do as a county to stay with it, to protect not only our office, but also the backs of the county legislators as well, to make sure that we're following the law and we're staying with the law. Right? So.
Before Supervisor Rachi, and you are next, and then Supervisor Driscoll. Amanda would like to ask a question.
So this motion is actually gonna land on 2 referrals, one to personnel, which is going to be to increase the salary schedule from where it is 0 now to the 47,608. That's the salary, base salary, correct?
Correct.
So it looks like you're also looking for funding for this from finance. So before it gets to finance, we're gonna need to know how much money you're looking for. If you have anything in your budget that's offsetting this, or you're looking for the total. And we'll also need to include your fringe benefits. So it's not as simple as just saying 2 times 47,608.
Okay.
We need to list out all of the fringe also, so we have a total amount of the appropriation to go to finance next week. So it's not, the total amount that you'd be looking for from finance wouldn't just be 2 times 47,608. It'll be all of the fringe.
That's something I can get with you.
Yeah, we'll need that before it gets to finance.
Okay, thank you.
So
Thank you.
will we need to know where it's coming from?
So finance is gonna determine where it's coming from. It's a large enough amount that I don't think they're gonna take it from contingent, but that's gonna be left to finance.
So we're just looking at the concept of funding, knowing that it's going to be 47 plus fringe benefits.
For each position.
All right, Supervisor Garachi.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Frankly, I'm not sure how they get the work done they do with just the number of people that are in there. I mean, they are extremely helpful, no matter what party you are, when you call, whoever answers provides tremendous assistance. So I completely support the request. I'm not sure if you look for a motion right now.
We already have a motion and a second,
Okay.
and I believe you were the second.
Yes.
Yes, okay. That was a long time ago.
Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chairman. Another issue, and I talked to the people who work at the voting sites, at least in my particular ward, all the time, every year. And I call those individuals my elders, because most of them are. And we've talked about that issue in a previous meeting this morning. And I think that something needs to be done to encourage and invite younger people to get involved in that type of work. And one way to do that is to find the formula, the money and the the opportunity to, that they want to invest in, whether it's a career in the department or, the different types of per diem opportunities available, or else, we're going to have, help wanted signs up on voter registration or voting sites. And that's something obviously we can't have.
One of the important things that you mentioned, Supervisor Driscoll, is we have started a program in the last 2 years, 2.5 years. We started a program where we're going into the schools, and Kim, Ross and Dustin were at Queensbury this year. And they were ecstatic. They said the enthusiasm of the students, 16, 17, and 18, who are now all pre-registered. So the minute they turn 18, they can now vote. But the enthusiasm that they got out of these kids and the ability for these kids to see the operation on how the machine votes or how the machine works, how their vote does count, and it was great. So our hope is if we can get this help and we can expand this to other schools, the younger generation will get a little more interest, and maybe our elders who we'd be lost without.
Oh, sure.
Maybe we
We
can
did
get,
actually have two 17-year-olds. They can work if they're 17. We did have two 17-year-olds work last year
Nice.
in November.
well, thank you.
Thanks.
Supervisor Conover?
I mean, look, no one likes to spend, money that unnecessarily. And I certainly am one of those people. Yeah, this isn't simply a question of having two bodies. These people have to have experience. They have to know the lay of the land. They have to have the corporate knowledge that comes from having been through some elections and having worked with the elections office. I mean, it's going to take a while to have these people, at full speed. At full
Absolutely.
speed. And then, of course, the challenge, like with all employees, is maintaining these people. The labor situation is not getting any better. And the trying to catch together things with part-time people, trying to grab them seasonally if you can. You haven't lived until you have voting machines go down in your town. And you have people who can't vote for one reason or another. And that's an excellent point. You need people to know exactly what to do when that happens. They know exactly who to call, exactly how to respond. So you don't miss a beat on this, because there's a function we have that has a higher responsibility other than public safety than the management of our elections and our democracy. And this proposal has my support, and it's interesting to see the sheet. There's a sheet in here. I get exactly where it is. It shows some of the other counties, and
It's your last.
Last sheet, I think.
the last sheet.
Yeah, it's the last
Just
page,
would
I
ask the
believe.
Supervisors, if they haven't looked at that sheet, to look at that sheet, because it doesn't put us, from personnel point of view, it doesn't put us way above all the other counties. If anything, it brings us to like the six, which is, we're allowed more already, and some are beyond that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Baum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As chair of personnel, there's sometimes a big issue in terms of adding new staff. I'm sure finance is going to have the same kind of challenge. I look at this and in your handout, you said you guys have worked over 700 hours. Right? If I do a little math and think that there's like 200 work days a year times 2 employees, you get 400 work days a year to make up 700 hours. So they're going to be working simply 2 hours a week, or 2 hours a day, or 2 hours a day. I'm sure you're going to have other things for them to do, but you got to help convey some of these other things that they're going to do to help, relieve some of the stress. So I myself personally in personnel can help make sure we get it over the hump and give it to Supervisor Leggett, and he can deal with the finance side.
Well, I think as I said, I think this is just a reference as to some of the things that we do over there. This is nowhere near. I mean, when these machines come back, 3% of the machines that go out in the course of an election have to be audited. We don't know when that machine is or how many machines that is until we know how many machines we sent out. The auditing done on those machines takes a day, 2 days. Cleaning out these machines and cleaning out the ballots and storing them properly that have to be maintained for 2 years. There's not any downtime. You know, when I sat in this chair back years ago, I sat here and used to hear the Board of Election only works 2 days a year. I got news for you. I had a wide eye-opening experience when I walked into that office over there. We don't have downtime. We're not down. We go from starting our petition period in February to getting our school ballots ready, to bringing petitions back in, getting our election ballots ready, having our primary in June, cleaning up from our primary, getting started for August, and training our inspectors, which is over 200 inspectors that have to be trained at the minimum of 3 hours per class that our deputies are doing right now. When our deputies are doing that, that's a downtime for the 200 DMV reports that come in that have to be done every week. Because Beth and I are either on the phone with legislators or we're on the phone with the New York State Board of Elections or doing something else that we would be doing. So, and like I said, this is just an example. And we just wanted to show there's no downtime over there.
Maybe you can show up for the meeting.
Are you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful.
That's fine.
Something to take to that.
And just a kind of short follow-up, Mr. Chair.
I just want to say next year we'll have a presidential primary, February, March, and then the school elections in May, then the general or the primary in June for the state and local, and then
August.
November for
Yeah.
August.
Well,
So,
You know, it is a 4-year cycle.
Mhm.
Whether this year is just as busy as last year because we have a whole different people that are coming to the office this year. It's candidates, it's making lists, it's helping them with petitions, guiding them along the process. Whereas in a presidential year, this time we'd be registering people for that primary. So it's just, there's always something and different stages of the election process.
and I know you guys are busy and I personally support this. Just one other question, if Dominion wins its court case against Fox News, are we going to get some rebates? You didn't have to answer that. Sorry.
Any other committee members? Any other privilege of the floor? All right, yes,
I would just like to say as budget officer, there's not an endless supply of money around here. So, just keep whipping it up and tapping it up, and banging that fund balance, and you're gonna find out that you're gonna run out of money at some point.
well, thank you for that note. That's true. All right, let's put it to vote. All those in favor of funding the two positions as described in depth here today for the Board of Elections, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Make it record show that Supervisor Thomas said nay. All right, but motion passes. Let's move on. And I just want to say that Commissioners Van Ness and McLaughlin, that what you heard in the committee, the praises of all your work you do, I hear that from the public too. I just want you to know that.
thank you.
Great job. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
All right, and number 3 on my list. What?
Thank you.
So next is, we have, well, there's 2 things, I believe. We have some proposed amending for the Warren County policy against discrimination and harassment. And with some proposed amending to the standing rules of the Board of Supervisors. Since it's listed first, let's deal with the first one. It appears that the scope of policy has been changed, and that is paragraph A on the first page, and I'm on the Warren County policy against discrimination and harassment. Elimination of or visitors And the inclusion of, that this policy, the term employees refers to this collective group and does not cover or include members of the general public. So, and then you'll see if you turn the page around to page 6 of 16, under section 4, policy enforcement, number 2, making a complaint, it states that, and this is a change, only employees shall be permitted to file complaints. So I'm not sure the origin of these proposed changes. So I'm going to ask anybody that is the originator of these changes to speak first.
Well, that would be me, because it's the county attorney's office that brought this to the committee as well as the next resolution request. And the reason is for a reason that I cannot determine. The existing policy is substantially broader than what's required from the county or enforceable under state law. And what we're talking about is sexual harassment, in essence, and discrimination. This policy is a policy that's required under state law to ensure that the employer has a policy on this topic that covers employees. For some reason, the existing policy includes a group which is not in that legal relationship with Warren County. And the word that was used was visitors, which has been used as any member of the public who wants to file a harassment complaint or a discrimination complaint against anybody at Warren County. And that's just not legally or administratively supported or required. So the very few changes that are in here are to clarify and amplify the purpose of this policy under state law and the purpose of having this policy in Warren County.
So some of the early remarks that I got from committee members, perhaps will come up again, that this is not targeting certain individuals and it wouldn't prohibit complaints coming to the board that we would have to deal with from folks that are from the community and not part of the elected assembly.
They would not be filing them under this policy. And under this policy, they wouldn't be going to the compliance officers who have to then apply state law, which doesn't cover members of the general public for this purpose. So a member of the public, if they have an issue or complaint, is free to complain to the government in a whole host of ways. But this policy of discrimination and harassment is mandated by state law and is not intended to be some catch-all for anybody, whether they're a resident of Warren County or not. It's a policy that's intended to protect employees as it's defined very broadly under the scope from these specific types of conduct.
All right, well, let's jump right to committee discussion. Any member of the committee wish to discuss further? Supervisor Conover?
Okay, so under the idea of this is the policy that relates to employees in the conduct of government. It says, I think correctly, it says that this applies to our employees, whether full-time or temporary, or leased employees, per diem, right? Interns, whether paid or unpaid, independent contractors, vendors, consultants, volunteers, and at one time it said, or visitors. I don't know what that means, or visitors. But we do have customers. In our departments, we have people that we provide the service to. Home care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that are part of, what we do. And so, do we need to better? Do we need to incorporate that in some fashion? In other words, I don't want to say, or customers, I'm not sure I like that terminology, but, in other words, that if someone were to be receiving a service here in our buildings or in their home from a county employee, should they need to, they could file a complaint under this policy.
The answer would be no.
The answer would be no, unless it was included.
But it's my legal opinion, it should not be included because what we're calling a visitor is a member of the public. And a member of the public at any point can complain about service that they received for any reason whatsoever. And the county can take action against an employee based on that complaint by a member of the public.
So you're saying that there are avenues for that complaint apart from this policy. This is designed specifically to instruct our employees and our agents.
Yes, the scope of this policy is for employees as it's defined in the policy. Once we remove that additional or visitors, because or visitors, there was probably some good thought or intention of why that was put there. But it's completely inconsistent with state law and federal law on sexual harassment and workplace harassment laws.
So Mr. Conover's point, though, is that many of our employees provide services to the community outside the employment of this entity, the county. They could be objects of sexual discrimination or harassment. Is this new language prohibiting them from bringing their complaint forward?
I'm not sure who them are. I apologize, but I didn't understand the way that was phrased.
I've seen situations where employees have sexually harassed other people who, as part of their employment, must interact with the municipal government. An employee was sexually harassing them. And under the umbrella of this municipality's sexual harassment, they were allowed to make a claim of sexual harassment, and our employees were forced to address that. We did not dismiss it because the object of the sexual harassment was somebody that was doing business with this municipality.
Yep, I understand what you're saying. Thank you. Let me clarify. If a member of the public is coming in for whatever purposes to this campus or any of our buildings and interacting with any of our employees, and they don't like, appreciate, or agree with the treatment that they receive or the services they receive, they always have the ability to complain and make a complaint concerning the service or the employee. That interaction has nothing to do with what this policy is supposed to do. This policy is supposed to protect employees from what's legally defined as sexual harassment. Conduct by an employee toward a member of the public that's inappropriate, we can call it sexual harassment, but it's not protected and defined as a legal claim of sexual harassment under New York state law under employer-employee relationships. So the addition of that or visitors expanded expanded who can file these complaints beyond the scope of what New York state law protects. And what New York state law and the core purpose of this policy is to ensure that these types of conduct do not occur toward employees of Warren County. Any member of the public can file you have to be careful of the word complaint, a grievance, a complaint, a letter with the county because they don't like the treatment they received, the service they received, and that should be handled through the departments and ultimately up to the county administrator. But that is outside of this policy. This policy is about protecting employees under state law.
Okay, and I'm not familiar with the county's policy on if an employee during the service and course of their duty as an employee of Warren County and deals with a vendor, say, of Warren County that is doing the business of Warren County, however, is not an employee, that we have a policy that would address the situation where an employee, and may not be in this building, it may be out in the field, has sexually harassed a vendor. I'm not aware of the policy that covers that situation. So,
And I can clarify that real simply. That's covered by this policy.
It's covered by this.
Because this policy applies to an employee, any personnel in a contractual or business relationship with the county, which includes a person who's an applicant, a temporary leased employee, an intern, independent contractors, vendors, consultants, and volunteers. All of those categories of individuals are deemed within the scope of protection as employees for purposes of sexual harassment. The or visitors are not. So a vendor, an independent contractor, a volunteer volunteering with one of our departments, an intern, they all have legal protection, and the county has liability towards them should sexual harassment occurs under federal and state law. There's a whole statutory framework where individuals in each of those categories have the ability to pursue litigation and lawsuits against the county for sexual harassment. And that's what this policy is designed to help tamp down and help avoid through that initial filing mechanism and the right of an employee, whether it's a vendor, independent contractor, intern, volunteer, use the procedure that's in this policy to address that liability or that potential liability by bringing the complaint, which is a very specific document under this policy, to the attention of the county's compliance officers for immediate action to stop that conduct, which also is immediate action to stop the county's liability. But we can't do that with members of the general public because the members of the general public are just members of the general public. So the modification is attempting to bring within the scope of the policy only complaints that are intended by state law and the requirements that we have this policy within the scope of the policy.
okay, Supervisor Driscoll, then Supervisor Conover, and then Supervisor Wild.
Thanks, Chairman. I just want to be clear. So I guess Cornell Cooperative Extension of Warren County would be considered a vendor or an entity that has a contractual relationship with Warren County. So they would be included in that.
I can't really answer off the top of my head, but if they're a vendor, if they're an independent contractor, if they fit the individuals who are in that business.
We have 5 supervisors who sit on their board. So I think that they're like a second cousin, to the,
Just gotta behave.
yeah. Yeah, I know. A lot of stuff goes on up there in Lawrenceburg. But no, that's the way I'm taking it. It actually broadens, without including the guests or something like that, which to me is, pretty ambiguous who that might be.
Okay, thank you Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, I mean, other than wordsmithing, what brings us to us today? Is there anything specific that brings us to us?
This comes to our attention because from time to time, there are complaints that come in from members of the general public that use resources because this policy would require a full airing and investigation of those complaints if and when they come in. So for example, and I'm making this up, you could have a person in California who watches this meeting and feels offended and then sends an email into the county and doesn't like their response. And then they send in a complaint because they feel that they've been somehow harassed or sexually harassed. This policy requires us to give it as much time, attention, and action as a complaint this policy is intended to address.
But on that topic, we are agreeing that a vendor, if they felt they were sexually harassed, could bring that complaint to us in the county. However, it says on the next page under section 4, only employees shall be able to make the complaint. Should we change that language to address what's on the page opposite?
Absolutely not, because the language on the scope of policy clearly provides and states that all of those categories for purposes of the rest of the policy are called employees. So if you're a vendor, you're an employee. If you're an independent contractor, you're always, yes, you are. As this policy is written, it says in the remainder of this policy, the term employees refers to this collective group and does not cover, which is the addition, and does not cover or include members of the general public. So, yeah, and that's always been the case. That's what the policy was beforehand. That hasn't changed. You know, it's just, you're not going to write every time you're going to use the word employees, you're not going to write every single category. Every single category in this policy is referred to as an employee, and they get those rights under this policy.
Well, that's not so clear to me, but I'm only one. And Mr. Supervisor Wild.
Thanks. I get it, Larry. I think I get it. I think that the stumbling block is, do we have a policy that somewhere that has the public's interest covered? So if there is something that somebody does against the public, what kind of mechanism do they have? And the way you explained it last time, some woman from California, you implied that we don't pay attention to it, but we still have to pay attention to certain complaints, right? So how do we address that? Is there a policy for that, or do we just?
And my purpose wasn't to say we don't, the person from California, not to, the intention is not to pay attention to it, but not to let it default into this very important policy that provides an ability to protect the county from liability.
It's a liability
There's
issue.
certainly the county could develop a policy for receiving issues of dissatisfaction from members of the general public and what we would do with that as a county. I'm not aware of a policy that does that. I would have to suspect that if there's an issue with an employee interaction that's brought to the attention of that person's supervisor and it's dealt with. But as far as something that's a formal, structured, you're going to do this every single time, that would be outside of state law requirements, and that would be a standalone separate policy that Warren County would create for itself.
Okay, so
I'm not sure if other counties have something like that, but I could certainly do a survey of some county attorney's offices to see if they,
And I think what happens is the public might even just call supervisors and say, hey, this was a bad experience, or call John or somebody. But I get the point that there's statute here, and we don't want to add more liability to the statute. And I think that's what, if I'm using my words correctly here, Larry, we're just trying to limit our liability. It's not that we don't want to protect the public, we do. But it just limits our legal liability with respect to employer-employee relationships. That's, if I'm not mistaken, it's employer, it's management, staff, it's supervisors, directors, and staff, right? It's employer, employee, right? And that's what this statute's all about.
Yeah.
And if we need to go further to say something else about how we deal with public issues with our people related to the public, then, maybe we need to look at that. But I think it's totally separate from the statute that we're talking about.
I get it, and I think you're right, Supervisor Wild. I would feel better because somebody's going to say only employees, that on section 4, policy enforcement, paragraph 2, making a complaint, that we put a parentheses following employees, saying see section 1A scope of policy, which seems to, from what I'm hearing, defines employees, at least as far as this policy goes. So if you would put parentheses following only employees, see section 1A scope of policy, that would redirect you to what we've been talking about, independent contractors, vendors, consultants, volunteers. It would make that clear that that's the group of people we're talking about who would be inclusive in this policy. All right, yeah.
and I don't have any issue with making that's, yeah, we can certainly add it there. Just so the committee knows, you only got the first 2 pages because there's no other changes that are being proposed anywhere else in the policy. This is a much longer detailed policy, but adding that there is certainly something I have no issue or problem with.
Okay. Supervisor Connor?
Right, just on item section 4A 2, Larry, complaints shall be are accepted.
Yeah, I crossed out on my copy and I wanted to note for the committee that we would take the R out. There, and then also under scope of the policy, we would add between vendors, consultants, comma, we would add and volunteers, period.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So making the grammar corrections so noted and adding the C section 1A scope of policy following employees, just so it has some cohesiveness. Is that acceptable to the committee? All right.
Yes.
Approval of the amended as just described Warren County policy against discrimination harassment was made by Supervisor Driscoll, seconded by Supervisor Wild. Any further discussion? Any discussion from outside the committee? All right, I'll move this to a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Any nays? Passes unanimously. Okay. Next item is going to the standing rules of the Board of Supervisors. If you go to page 7 of 8, you will see that number 7 has been eliminated. Number 7 said, and is being proposed to be removed, filling of existing vacant positions, not new positions, can only be created by a 2/3 majority of the board. So what this simply is doing is removing 2/3 as a requirement for accepting, for filling existing vacant positions. And I also believe creating new positions will only require a majority vote of the board. County council,
Certainly. I was asked in January by a member of the Board of Supervisors to review the creation of new positions through the budget process and why they did that did not follow the 2/3 majority rule that's set forth in the rules of the board. And as a result of that, we put significant research into the county attorney legal opinion 2023-1, which was issued, distributed, and then discussed in executive session. I'm not going to review or discuss that legal opinion in the open meeting as it's attorney-client communications. However, this modification conforms and brings into compliance with state law on those two issues of creating new positions and filling positions. So specifically, there was that phrase in the first sentence that was in brackets that said, not new positions. These can only be created by a 2/3 majority vote of the board. And that had been for some period of time before I got here, a basis for requiring a 2/3 majority vote to create a new position outside of the budget process, outside of the budget process. The budget process is clearly defined and provided for under county law, Article 7, under finance, as a step-by-step statutory process that the county must follow in creating the annual budget. And as part of that process, it includes not just the creation of any new positions through the budget process, but the reauthorization on an annual basis of all the existing positions within the county. So that when this county, through the Board of Supervisors, takes an affirmative vote on that budget, making it the operating budget for the next year, the county, by majority vote, which is the requirement by statute, is creating any new positions that are in that budget and refunding or continuing positions that are already in place for the next year. So that's kind of part one. And when you dig in and you look at some opinions from the Attorney General's office and the Comptroller's office, it becomes very, very clear that a 2/3 majority vote to create a position outside of the budget violates state statute. So the recommendation is to amend the rules first to remove that 2/3 majority vote requirement when creating a new position, because it's inconsistent with the requirements of county law as that's set forth by New York state law. And then the second piece was a result of doing the research on that first question of creating new positions, which is filling vacant positions, because it became very clear in looking at state statute that state statute authorizes at the county level department heads to fill vacant positions that have been budgeted for the year, and does not authorize or allow the addition of additional approval steps for a department head to fill a position that's already been funded through the budget for that year. That doesn't mean you can give a different salary. It means that that would be separate and apart. But the ability to fill a vacant position by statute is given to a department head. And the rationale and reason is that position's already funded for the year. And I don't want to get into the policy side of it. So I'm going to refer to it as the practical side. If the position exists and it's funded and it's being filled according to those budget approved requirements, state statute says the department head has the authority to just fill that position. Currently, we could be taking up to 30 days or more than 30 days on occasions to go through the process that's described in this paragraph, which is an additional approval process before the department head can then move forward and finalize the filling of a position. And that directly conflicts with state law and state statute.
Okay,
So that's the rationale. As I looked at that one paragraph, for not just removing the 2/3 majority vote, but the entire paragraph, because it requires additional procedures which conflict with New York state law.
discussion.
Bring the motion to the floor.
Motion made to the floor to approve the amending of the standing rules of the Board of Supervisors in that we are going to be eliminating paragraph 7 of section E, voting for members of the Board of Supervisors, which takes away the 2/3 vote. A second on that proposal is Supervisor Frazier. Any more discussion? Supervisor Conover.
Larry, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, Larry, just so we're clear, nothing precludes the Board of Supervisors from at any time amending the organizational structure of a department and effective funding associated with that department. That option still exists. And I don't want anyone to think that.
And I didn't get into that detail, but let me do it right now. County Law 204 very, very clearly states that the only body for purposes of Warren County that has the authority, and it's a sole authority, to create a position or to abolish a position is the Board of Supervisors. It's an absolute, you can't delegate it, you can't, it's the Board of Supervisors who has to create and has to abolish. That same statute, the very next subsection states what I'm talking about filling of those positions. So, I mean, it is what it is. It just says there that if it exists and, you know.
My point is that anyone suggesting that that we're not able to, should it be required to modify the organizational structure of county government or the funding for that organizational structure, we are invested with that power.
And that's understood.
And I apologize for, but it's by majority vote. So there's not a higher burden or a higher standard to abolish as to create. It's a majority vote for each of those statutory.
That's correct, and that shouldn't surprise anyone because the budget itself, which creates and funds close to 1,000 positions, is by majority vote.
Yeah, all right, Supervisor Wild.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've always felt that, you know, if we have an approved position, why does it take so long to get those positions approved? It's taken us a long time because our salary structures have been low or people didn't want to work during COVID or the like. But if they're approved, we should have let the department heads do what they need to run their operation. So my only concern is we might have a bunch of positions that might be funded that we don't really want to have funded, but that's up to the budget officer. I think he's probably got it together. I hope that we should be able to move forward. So I'm in support of this.
Any other discussion among committee members? Yes, Supervisor Thomas.
All right, yeah, I can, you know, I see your points in wanting to remove this, but isn't it also true that if the board wanted to, could they not enact their own local law to make the state statute more stringent, which would pretty much include the same type of language?
And the answer is absolutely. It would actually be a local law. Hold on 1 second. I don't want to misspeak on it.
Because the reason that this stuff in here has evolved this way was because back in 2007, 8, 9, when we had the recession, we were abolishing positions, and the board felt that they wanted to make it as difficult as possible to create, first of all, create new positions, and plus also make it difficult to fill vacant positions. And that's the reason that this wording developed this way.
And it was a valid reason. There's case law involving other counties who took somewhat similar actions. I don't want to say the same action, but similar actions that flowed out of 2008, 2009. And in those cases, those resolutions were challenged and abandoned because of state law. But it would be under home rule law. It would be a local law by mandatory referendum, meaning it would have to go out to vote to the county as a whole in order to become a local law that's then enforceable to change the voting structure on this issue.
Supervisor Conover?
Yeah, and I mean, to me, there's a big difference between, Frank, I was around then in 2010. There's a difference between changing the organizational structure of county government, which is what effectively was happening then, and micromanaging the department. I mean, to me, there's a world of difference between acting as a board of supervisors and reorganizing county government with fewer people, which is what in fact is taking place for whatever reason, budgetary or other reasons, but using a provision to try to manage a particular department.
Any other discussion, committee? Privilege of the floor? Seeing none, let me put this to, yes, Supervisor Wild.
You know, I'm a little concerned about the budget officer's comments. And what might be facing us in terms of our revenue structure here coming up, potentially.
Yeah.
You know, I'm almost thinking I'd like to have a budget committee meeting to kind of discuss all the different things that are going on, so we could all together get a sense of where we stand, what the outlook is, what we're going to do. I think it's important for us to
I have
do
a
that.
second. I have to put it to a vote.
Do that.
All right.
And if I could just maybe one more comment, that would be an excellent idea, especially if there's a desire of the county to move in the direction of a local law by mandatory referendum to instill that type of a rule on the county that will be enforceable going forward and comply with state law.
All right, so
The second on that.
And no, it's a motion, right?
so we're voting now on the elimination of this paragraph from our
Okay,
state
okay,
rules.
All right,
And I think there's also a movement,
okay.
not
all
really
right.
part of
That's part of it, sure.
this committee, to bring it to a committee to take a look at maybe adopting a law
Yeah.
that would accomplish the same thing, but county attorney feels that this is not the proper place for it. And as a matter of fact, it's illegal having it here. So all those in favor of the proposed amending of the standing rules as discussed today, please signify by saying aye.
Right.
Any nays? All right, passes. I don't know about you, but having this meeting at this time of the day without, the county administrator getting pizza and all that.
That's what we paid for, isn't it?
All right, so we do have other items that we've been dismissing. The first item on foil, I believe that I can speak for the county attorney that he is working, or somebody in his office is working on that to make sure it's in accord with the computer policy that we recently passed. The other item, reimbursements to supervisors for non-education related expenses. I'm not sure what that comes from, where it comes from, what they expect us to do. I'm not sure.
And my office has taken no action on that because I don't really understand
So,
how I can determine for the Board of Supervisors what they choose to deem such an expense.
Well, we could,
I would say, given the fact that there isn't a committee member advancing this, that it's just being removed from the agenda.
If that's the consensus of the committee, we can remove this from the agenda, and it appears to be so. And I'm going to suspect the next item as well. That although we support the concept and everything else of Juneteenth, we've had the discussion that perhaps that discussion is better located in the negotiations committee as they seem fit, not necessarily a topic that we want to deal with. Is that the consensus of the committee?
That is with me.
It appears to be the consensus of the committee to remove that from further discussion. So we will have the foil discussion forthcoming when it's appropriate and prepared. Anything else for the good of the order, either from the committee or from
We have
what?
Juneteenth off of the,
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, that's the one that you, okay.
yeah, well, the discussion before, if my memory serves me, is that's better with the negotiations committee than it would
Right,
be
yeah,
here.
okay, yeah.
And you're kind of pulling the carpet out from the negotiations committee by taking it away from them as a negotiating item. Although I think this committee recognizes the importance of it, and we don't mean to diminish that.
Sure.
Okay, again, any discussion from the committee or floor?
Just one, for
yes.
discussion at the next meeting, I'd just like the committee's consensus. If I can schedule, there's a practice management software company that provides support services for FOIL prior to the county administrator starting. We got a view of how it works, the fundamentals of it. It was myself, Tammy, and Christy who looked at it. And I'd like to get a consensus if I can try to schedule maybe a 15-minute presentation. I think it'll work very nicely with reviewing the FOIL policy. Because it'll help maybe bring it all together for the committee and for the entire board of how we may be able to move forward to make this much more manageable and efficient.
All right, and I see Amanda's writing that down, and she'll include that in our next agenda. All right. Motion to adjourn. Motion made by Supervisor Driscoll, seconded by Supervisor.
I'll raise my hand up. It's been that long.
By